Over the past 6 months, we've introduced 5 signal controllers. And so I want to take the opportunity today to go through and explain an overview, sort of quickly, how what each of these does and sort of the genesis of it. So let's start with this version down here. This is the first version of the signal controller. This is for LEDs. So there are 4 terminals, a common and red, green, and yellow. It's very simple to use, and there's a detect line, a latching line, and we provide the power cord with it. So that's the first signal controller. All of the signal controllers have latching, and all of them now have a DCC decoder in them, so you can drive this off of DCC. If you don't have DCC, you can drive this off a simple switch. If you have no DCC and you have turnouts, there are ways to hook up our coil detector to that. Well, actually, that's for the Dwarf Controller. We'll get to that in a second. So that's the signal controller. They all come with a magnetic bracket. So it slides on very easily. They stay on, even if they're bounced around quite a bit. We've had people go to trade shows and said, no, they didn't come off. So that's the LED 3-light signal controller. So the next one up is the 3-light fiber controller, and it's very similar to this one, same functionality, single push button for configuring, and just you slide the fibers in. It comes with a little pin and put that in there. So that's the 3-light fiber version. So 3-light LED version, 3-light fiber version. We're tending to like fiber a lot because the light comes out the end point of the fiber. We make a little lens on the end of it and color it, and that works really well. They're easy to assemble, put down to the layout. And there's some other videos on the channel on more in detail of how to install that. The next one up actually is this one. I don't have the sticker on it. It's a 4-light output. And so the reason you would use a 4-light output is if you had a PRR, what we call Pennsylvania Railroad 7-light signal. Now we have this in both, we have this in fiber, we don't have this in LED. So the way this works is there's 3 positions, vertical, horizontal, and diagonal. And so those 1, 2, 3 positions are held. And then there's a center light. So the center light is separately controlled. And so we have a separate video on that, but just that's the 7-light output. And because most of these lights are warm white, we have a slightly different LED system to light the fibers in this controller. Okay, the next one up was, and this is really going gangbusters, is the Dwarf Controller. So here, I'll bring over a whole collection of them, but here's the Dwarf. This is the O size, so it's pretty big. And in the case of the Dwarf signal controller, there are a pair of outputs. So when you're operating this with a sensor or DCC, you can have 2 separate outputs, one for one turnout, one for another turnout, and the 2 signals on the Dwarf will change from red to green and back. This also has something called interlocking. So if you have a step ladder of switches going through your yard, the signal controller will keep track of which position the turnouts are in such a way that if a train on a siding can't get out, in other words, the main line is closed, not thrown, all the lights in the yard, according to how you want to configure it, would show red regardless of the switch position because the train can't get out. So there's no clear path to exit. So that's what we call interlocking, and all of the Dwarf signal controllers have that built in. All right, so the next member of the family here is the recent one, and we just talked about it a few minutes ago. There's a video coming up in a second, and that is the single fiber searchlight LED. And I don't have this plugged in right now, but in this case, the fiber just plugs right into the manifold, just like that. And we have red, green, and yellow coming out the light, and that's really cool. So there are the 5 signal controllers that we have introduced at Model Train Technology. Now to go with them are a whole series. Now this is just what we've done in the last 6 months. Here are all the block signals. Let me put this one back here. And they all have magnet bases except for the dwarfs, all right? So the dwarfs are too small really to use the magnet effectively. We have searchlight, we have 7 light, we have 2 and 3 light for HO and N scale, and then we have and we also have O and S scale in all these configurations. Here's the S scale and HO, and now we have this is what we've been using for the N scale, and now we have a reduced size N scale that's a little bit more prototypical in size. If you ordered the N scale standard size, you can order more of those. If you're on the website in about a week, you'll be able to order the even smaller one. This is a little tricky, just trying to get the fibers and so forth to work, but that's the N scale dwarf signal. So quite a collection available to you. All right, so the last thing I want to show you, and this also relates to our signaling and signal controllers. Here's the, let me move this out of the way. Here's the sensor, the HO sensor, precision sensor. We use a laser type sensor. It's class A, it's not harmful at all, and it has a 1 millimeter precision, and it's not affected by ambient light. So your room can be perfectly dark, perfectly light. You don't have to adjust it at all. You can take it to trade shows. The sodium lights won't affect it, and it just works great. You can adjust the range for detecting the train so that one track in N scale is detected and the other track is not. Reflected IR, which we've been using for 25 years, is just temperamental, to say the least. So this sensor solves that. So we're pretty happy with it, with one exception. I thought it was pretty clever to add this micro dip switch, so you could just flip a switch and that would be all the configuration. The problem we've discovered is that it works fine, but if it's out in the layout and you have to pull it up and then you're reaching over and trying to push these switches, close them or open them, it's difficult. And sometimes the wire pops out and so forth. So what we did is we got rid of the dip switch, and now we have a push button. So you don't even have to look at the switch. You can just feel the push button and push it a certain number of times to switch between the scales, the timeout value, extending the time, and whether you want it in inverse mode. So pretty simple, just an addition there with a push button, and that's the progression, personal feedback and also from customers. There's the HO version, and then here's the N scale version with the same configuration, same push button switch. So we think that's a pretty good improvement. And so that's a quick wrap up and catch up on all of the block signaling, dwarf signaling, the sensors, and the signals themselves.